In this video, we're going to talk about an important part of the Honeybee-PH workflow related to what we call building segments. So far in our videos, we've been building up our two-zone massing, our two-zone model, and that's been coming into our WUFI file as two separate cases. So here we want to talk about how we're going to merge those together into a single case when we export out to WUFI. In order to do that, we're going to use a component or a set of tools that we've been calling building segments. And it's worth just talking about for just a brief moment. Conceptually, the problem here is that Honeybee and WUFI work in very, very different ways. Honeybee has this language of rooms, as we've seen, and the rooms, it's kind of a weird vocabulary choice. It's really more a zone. You really should think of them as Honeybee zones, thermal zones. But there's no level of organization. There is no model element higher than the zone. And so we can't group together zones. We can't put 5 zones together and say, you 5 zones, you form the west wing of the building. Or you 12 zones, you're the residential part of the building, and you 6 zones, you're the non-residential part of the building. Honeybee just doesn't have a language for that. By contrast, of course, in WUFI, especially when we start working on mixed-use buildings, larger multifamily buildings where you might have a residential tower over a commercial podium, we need to start to break up our zones, our rooms, into what WUFI calls cases, or what we have been using the term in the Honeybee-PH world, building segments. An arbitrary chunk of the building, you get to define what the building segment is. It could either be the entire building, it could be one floor of the building, it could be one wing of the building, it could be the tower of the building, whatever logic works best for your building. But the building segment allows you to group or join or merge certain Honeybee rooms together so that when they get exported to WUFI-Passive, they come in as a single case. And so that's what we want to do in the model here. We want to take our multiple Honeybee rooms and merge them together into a single building segment. And that's very straightforward. It's quite easy to do. All we need to do, we'll come into our Grasshopper file here. So this is our Grasshopper file that we've been working in, where we're pulling in our geometry on the left-hand side there, and then outputting to WUFI on the right-hand side here. All we need to do, make a little room, all we need to do is we need to collect up the rooms. So remember what we've got here. We've got a couple of different Honeybee rooms that are flowing through. We need to sort of merge these rooms together, or really what we need to do, because we don't actually want to merge the rooms together, we want to say, both of you rooms, you belong to a certain building segment. And so in Honeybee-PH, so I'm going to come up to Honeybee-PH, and I'm going to come over to the end here, and notice that we have this building segment component. So I'm going to grab this building segment component and drop it onto the canvas here. And this has got a whole bunch of inputs that we really don't need to worry about right now. The main thing is we're going to take our HB rooms and we're going to input them into the HB rooms. And any room that gets input here, so all the rooms that get input here, get tagged or assigned to this building segment. Now you can have more than one building segment in your project. You might have a dozen building segments in your project. It depends on your project, how it's organized, how it is logically broken down. In our project here, we really only have one. We have one building. We really don't want it split up across multiple cases. Remember, by default, the different Honeybee rooms get distributed to individual cases. We really don't want that here. So both of the Honeybee rooms, room 1 and room 2, floor 1 and floor 2, those are both going to come in, and we want to tag them both with the same building section or building segment. Now there's a couple other things that we could set here, so we could definitely maybe give it a name. We'll call this Ed's first building segment. give it a name. And we could also, we don't have to worry about the rest of this stuff right now, but maybe let's just give it a number of floor levels. So it is 2 floor levels. And then lastly, how many dwelling units? Well, it's just one. It's just a single family home. So we'll just say it's 1 dwelling unit. And now, what do we have coming out here? We just have honeybee rooms coming out. So honeybee rooms coming in, they get tagged with this building segment. Honeybee rooms come out, and so we can just pass those along into the links in our chain here. Get rid of this. So what have we done? I mean, it doesn't really look much different. We just added a new component in line here. But what you'll see, I'll come over here to our writer, and I'll write this out. What you'll see when we write this out is that it's going to look very different when we open it up in WUFI-Passive. So I just wrote it out. I'll come down here, open up WUFI-Passive. Come up to File, Open, as always. Come down here and make sure that we set this to XML. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to use the latest timestamp XML file. I'm going to say Open. And look at that. Now, both of our zones are merged together. So now they exist in one case in WUFI terminology, right? We only have a single case now. So the writer has merged those 2 honeybee rooms together into a single case. Now, if we wanted that to happen, which we do in this case, that's a good thing. Alternatively, of course, we can organize our project differently if we want to break out a set of zones as the residential component. Again, this is most common in mixed-use buildings, residential with a commercial podium or something. You want to say these 10 zones are the residential tower and these 12 zones are the commercial podium. They'll come in as different cases into WUFI in that circumstance. So in any event, though, this seems to be working properly. This is exactly what we expected. I'll close that. That's exactly what we wanted there. Now, one other thing that we can do here, so, in WUFI, it's a little different in PHP, but in WUFI, you can kind of think of this as a case. Right? So this building segment is really a case. And so anything that you want to set at the case level can be set here. So for instance, the most important thing that we might want to set at this point would be site information, climate information. So we have no climate or site being set right now, but notice here that there is an input in our building segment for site information. So we can input lots of different data about the site of our building. Where is our building climatically, geographically? So let's do that. Let's add a site to our building. Let's make a little bit of room here. Whoops. Make a little bit of room here, and let's talk about site. So here in Honeybee-PH, notice that we've got a whole bunch of components over here related to site. So we've got some climate data, we've got some temperature, some radiation, location, peak load. We've got all sorts of data here related to the climate, the location of your building. Now we can absolutely build up a detailed site based on very bespoke custom input data. So for instance, I could come in here and I can build a site. So here's our site component. So I can take this site component and I can drop the site component onto the canvas. By default, we're not really going to get very much. We've got a whole bunch of, there's a bunch of fields here, but there's not a lot of data. Notice we get all zeros, so everything's kind of zeroed out. And the site, notice that it wants a location and some climate data. So for instance, we could take this location component, grab a location, and we could feed the location into location. And now I could set things like the longitude, latitude, elevation, blah, 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 blah. I could also feed in climate data. So here's the climate data component. We could take the climate data, and we could take this climate data and put the climate data into the climate data. What does the climate data want? Well, the climate data wants monthly temperatures and peak loads and radiation values. So we could come in here and we could grab one of these guys and we could say monthly temps, monthly temps, go into monthly temps. We could input a series of 12 average monthly temperatures. So the monthly temperature of January and February, March, blah, 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 blah. All of that. So there are tools to do all of that, right? There are lots of tools to let you build up a custom site based on input data. So for instance, I might come in here and I might say, just drop a panel, and we would say, 10, 14, 45, 67, 70, da, 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 da. I would input all of that information, and then that would go into the air temps. Now this is going to error. It's going to say, hey, you only gave me 7 values. I guess let's do it properly. Was that the right? list of 11, 50, 30. There we go. All right, so we can come in and we can input a series, right? So this is January, February, March, April, May. Obviously, I just made this data up, so don't pay attention. But you could absolutely build up a site this way, and then this site object, so a Honeybee-PH site object, could get input into the site here. So that's one way to work with this. That's very laborious. You might have to do that in certain circumstances, no doubt. For FIAS projects, it's much easier. We have a component here, this create site from FIAS file, which allows us to just read in a FIAS file. So I can use my file path, and I can point this at a FIAS text file. So FIAS text file, let me go back to my source files. So here's my source files. Again, we'll put the download link in the description below for these. But notice we have a climate here, and we've got some climate data. So this is a text file. You can download these from the FIAS website. So if you go to the FIAS website and search for climate data, there's a whole section of the website where you can download these text files. So not the Excel file, but the text file. So the text file with all the data, so I have all the data here, and I want to just bring this data in. So somehow I want to point Grasshopper at that file. So I come in here, give it a file path, say select one existing file. I will navigate to my sample files. So I will just briefly navigate to sample files, source files, climate, there we go, wherever these happen to be saved on your computer. So there's that guy. Let me, again, I always do this just to keep things consistent as we go, keep things tidy. You'll find it's very important to keep things predictable and tidy in your Grasshopper scenes. They get out of control real fast. In any event, we now have a site object here. So we have a site object, which is the data from that climate. And I just take that and plug that in to my site here. And all of that is now flowing through into our WUFI file as well. So I can rewrite the WUFI file, or rewrite the HBJSON, rewrite the WUFI file, come up here and open up WUFI-Passive again. And we'll go File, Open. I will navigate to my desktop, use the newest time-stamped version, and it looks the same, so there's our project. But now if we were to go to Case, if we were to go to Case Localization, notice we've got all sorts of climate data in here now. So all the climate data from that location, from that text file, is now flowing through, right? So cold in winter, warm in summer, as one would expect. I happen to use a northern climate. In this case, it was, I believe, JFK Airport in New York City. John F. Kennedy Airport in New York City. So that's the weather station that I happen to use for this example here. But again, you can point this component at any text file that you want, any text file that you download from FIAS. So you go to FIAS, you can download all the climate data, and then just point this at it. It'll bring that in and then automatically load it up into your WUFI-Passive file. Alrighty, so I think we should leave it there. We now have we've added a little more organization to our WUFI-Passive files. We've merged our two rooms together, and we've set up the climate data. So we're getting a little bit closer. We're starting to add and refine our model. And this is going to be the process as we start going through all the next sections. We're going to continue to refine and add more data to our WUFI-Passive model until we have it complete. But I think this is good enough for now. We can leave this one here. When we come back, I think we will move from the whole building scale. So the building segment obviously is up at the it's a level higher than the Honeybee room. In the next section, we want to kind of go a level lower than the Honeybee room. We want to dive into the individual spaces, talk about things like the treated floor area, or the conditioned floor area of the building, how we're going to manage those interior spaces within those Honeybee rooms. So we'll take a look at that in the next video.